What's going on, everybody? Thanks for checking out the Among the Ashes podcast this week. We will be your hosts, Wes, Marcus, and Luke. Before we jump into this week's episode, we want to take just a second and say thank you to each and every one of you guys that's been following along with us so far. It really does mean the world to us. We really do appreciate it. If you guys are checking us out on YouTube and you haven't done so yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us a comment. We do want to hear from you guys, and we do want to get feedback on the show. And don't forget to turn on that notification bell so you can stay up to date when we upload each Thursday morning at 9 a.m. When you're done there, if you don't mind, jump over to one of these platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or YouTube Music, and give us a follow there. It helps the show to grow. That's true podcast platform. You don't get the video, but you do get the audio, and you can download an episode from when you don't have time to just sit and watch the show. Also, if you don't mind, share the show with your friends, leave us a 5-star rating, and help us to get out there to the masses. And don't forget to tune in every Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Central Time. Lastly, if you would like to be a part of the show, or you have a show idea, shoot us an email at amongtheashes@yahoo.com, or you can jump over into our DMs on Facebook, TikTok, or Instagram, all searchable by Among the Ashes Podcast. So now that all of that's out of the way, let's get into this week's episode. Talked about, you had asked me the question of where I think, or why do I think that we don't find the bones, and you were talking about how that there were occultists who had consumed the bones, I guess, for lack of better words, we're grinding them up, whatever. So pick up from there.
Absolutely, man. So all said and done, because we kind of got into the rabbit trail there a little bit on the Eucharist, which, no hate, man, that's awesome. It's a good topic, and it really ties into the whole idea of rituals, right?
Sure.
And so I think that really a lot of this has to do with the fact that these bones are used for rituals, and we can verify that because in other cultures, you can go to, I think it's I can't remember what island it's on. There's an island, and I'll find it here in a second, actually, but I'll talk about it as I'm looking it up. Basically, they had these giants in a cave. It was in California. It was on the coast of California, all those little islands. They basically had bones that were laid out, and they would worship these bones. And they would use them for ritual purposes, for power, for fertility, for lot. So I think that the fact that, just like we talked about Moses, his bones were supernaturally charged. I don't know what else to call it. It sounds kind of kooky, but I mean, I just don't think we have good vocabulary for these categories. And really, I think that these bones are being kept hidden for ritual purposes, for power. And I think that a lot of the guise of that has to do that it's all covered by science. That science is the one that is really leading the way, which is hilarious.
But it makes sense to me too, and I know this gets kooky right here, and some places we probably shouldn't have talk about this, so we'll verbalize it the best way we can.
Yeah, sure.
When you get to hearing about adrenochrome and the consumption of smaller beings, fluids, again, that gets into the weird, right? It gets into the conspiracy, it gets into the woo, but at the same time, it would make sense if that's the case of the ritualistic aspects of things, why they do it, or why they would do it. If adrenochrome is a thing and people are consuming to stay younger, to stay youthful, why wouldn't the grinding up of the DNA of these giants for their abilities and their powers not make sense as well? Sure.
Absolutely, man. We're tracking totally on the same page on that. And I think that's it's largely, I don't know if intentionally, but at least conveniently hidden by the guise of science. Right. Well, that's not scientific. We can't really prove that. Well, we've already established, if you are a Christian and your worldview is not supernatural, which means you think that things can happen out of the ordinary that are not natural, then you need to rethink your faith. And you need to rethink that, not only your faith, but you really, frankly, need to look at the nature of reality. Just look at, if you're not willing to engage with those difficult topics, well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe that's not, Christianity is not the religion you're really actually looking for. Maybe you're looking for something else altogether, something that fits your fits your bill, right? Makes you comfortable. But if you want to live in an echo chamber, maybe you shouldn't be on this podcast either. So, so
well, and again, it does get weird. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, dude, it does.
And that's where I was
weird.
talking about earlier about my feet landing in both camps, right? Like,
Yeah.
it does get weird, and I am totally open to the weird. I am totally open to the supernatural.
Yeah.
What I am not totally open to is us putting men on pedestals,
Sure,
because they know so much,
or any other creature for
in
that,
or any other creature, right?
Yeah.
We're essentially doing nothing different than what humans did thousands of years ago whenever God flooded
Which
the
is
earth.
lying to ourselves about it is what we're
Right.
actually doing,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous and unfortunate. And I think that's I actually think right now what's happening online with this chronic onlineness and this obsession with the supernatural is literally like humanity coming to terms with its own hypocrisy. I think that that's what we're watching happen. And I think that that's why people are crashing out all the time, dude.
Yeah.
And they're super fascinated by any random spiritual occurrence. Don't get me wrong, I'm just as fascinated by spiritual stuff as the next person. But when I watch it, I'm thinking, what is happening in the nature of reality that's making that work? Why does it work? Right. Like, so that's always the question we should be asking ourselves as Christians. It's not does it work? It's why does it work?
Right.
Right.
Well, and I feel like that part of the side of it is how do we make it work to our benefit? You know,
right.
Instead of how do we make it work to benefit God and His
kingdom,
plan, His creation. You know what I'm saying?
Man.
And that's where I feel like the guys like we talked about at the beginning of the show. Again, sure. I don't know them. I've never talked to them, but man, when I watch videos of theirs or
that's what rubs
videos,
you, right?
Yeah, or videos where they're on another podcast, like typically the people that they're on their podcasts are very unseasoned Christians, but they are very well known within society or within they're influencers basically.
Yeah.
They've just given their life to Jesus, and this sounds cool, so I'm going to have these people on my podcast. And then these people come on, and the things that they're talking just hit me in my knower. It's like, no, this is not right. But then I can get on a podcast with you, not because I know you, but because even before I knew you, even before I ever brought you on, the things you said are so out of the scope of what normal Christianity would be.
Right.
But the things that you said were like, no, this guy is speaking from biblical truths. He's speaking from a place of he's prayed about this. It's not, hey, just jump on the train and follow me. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm willing to talk about these topics and keep my eyes and my ears open to it. But then there's some things out there. It's like, no, this is not of God. You guys need to stop listening to this. The only reason you're doing this is because it's a supernatural side of things, which God is, but it's almost like you're trying to get God to grant your wish by believing in this weird kooky stuff, and you'll get your wish granted for sure, but it may not be God who's granting it. You know what I mean?
Man, careful with that. Holy cow.
And that's why I want people to be careful, and just in general, even in listening to this podcast, like you open yourself up for spiritual warfare just by talking about these things, in my opinion. And most people don't even understand what spiritual warfare is.
Yeah.
Or how to combat it. You know, we think we can, I declare, decree, and rebuke, and it's done. And it's like, no, it's not always done that way. You know what I mean?
I do. And you, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. You said something super good earlier, and I'm going to forget it. It is. I'm totally on board with you, man. That's all I can say, because I can't remember something you said that I was going to remember. It'll come to me. We have to be cautious with how we approach things. And I think it is good to keep that open mind and listen to when your spirit is checked.
Yeah.
Listen very carefully. Right. Having said that, we're going to actually swing the other way, because I think that there is a paradigm that needs to be uncovered, I guess we can call it. So everyone has heard of the Smithsonian. Everybody and their mom has heard of the Smithsonian. I've been to the Smithsonian. I don't know if you've ever been to one. It's pretty interesting. It was a cool place to go. When I was in 8th grade, I didn't know anything about it. I was like, oh, cool. We're going to go to Washington, D.C. Let's go to the Smithsonian. it's really interesting, you know, all sorts of history, but it is very doctored history. It's extremely doctored. And we're going to get into how and why. And some of it is not going to make a whole lot of sense, as many mysteries are often shrouded, right? And you don't get the whole truth. You just get parts of it. Dude, I got to tell you, Wes, one of my favorite things to think about, dude, is when I go before the throne and I'm no longer in this body and I get to see all the stuff that happened and why it happened and how it happened. I'm so excited to see all that and just be like, oh, that's why it was. That's crazy, you know? And all sorts of like history. Like we were just talking about giant Nephilim wars, right? In the Ohio Valley. I'm like, dude, I don't even know anything. I don't even know anything about that. I want to see what the heck happened, you know, like that kind of stuff gets me excited. Anyway, Smithsonian files. Don't diverge, Ricky, don't diverge. So the Smithsonian is a very weird curation of historical items and narratives and objects and so on and so forth. We're going to start with the Smithsonian because I would really say that they kind of set the bar in the United States for kind of scientific and historical discovery, right? Like they're the ones that say, well, this is the narrative that we're painting. And they have for quite a long time. So let's get into some of the details here. The writers of this book, by the way, which the book I'm using is The Giants on Record by Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman, an American and a British guy. They purportedly say, you know, they didn't really have any assumptions about anything conspiratorial or maleficent coming out of the Smithsonian before they started researching all this stuff. And then they were sort of like, oh, this is weird. Like there's some serious stuff that's weird here. So how did the Smithsonian get started? It was originally funded with a $500,000 grant, which today would be somewhere in the ballpark, guys, of like almost $400 million at that time. That's an insane amount of money. It was donated by an English scientist named James Smithson. He passed away in 1829, and the United States came into the Smithsonian in 1836. The Smithsonian, just so you know, sits in a very weird place. It's not private. It's also not government, which is already makes your head scratch. Like, well, what the heck is it then? Just to give you guys an idea of the overwhelming monetary power that the Smithsonian has, when it was given to the United States and paid for, it was paid for by a foreigner from England. The guy never stepped foot on the United States soil in his life. So that should already make you ask some questions. I don't know anything about him. I haven't researched him. I'm just, kind of getting my feet wet here. But the amount of money that he gave to build the Smithsonian was 1/66th of the entire United States federal budget at that time. Wow. That's insane. That is an insane amount of money, dude. That's an insane amount of money. So he essentially started the Smithsonian as kind of like the height or the goal to be really to bring culture and understanding and foment, ideas to move forward and just really he wanted that to be kind of the namesake of Smithsonian, right? Like that was really their goal. Let's see here. Now we move forward kind of to who got it established and everything. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds about how it was established. I think we kind of understand it. But there was a guy whose name was John Wesley Powell. He essentially founded the Bureau of Ethnology. And this was back in 1879. And kind of around that time is really when we had ideas going on. I'm not sure if you might be familiar with this, Wes, but this is like the whole manifest destiny belief about how we have a right as Americans to settle this land very, in some ways, very Christian, in other ways, very human interpretation of Christianity, right? I think that's probably a better way to phrase it. And so that was really a strong phenomenon or a really strong kind of feeling in general, right? Like that was just kind of the overall feeling by the populace at that time. He was this guy, John Wesley, was a humongous proponent of Native American cultures and just wanting to preserve their culture and stuff. And he was very insistent about the fact that the remains, that the earth mounds that we have were by the natives. Now, I don't deny that some of them probably were. I don't know how many, but honestly, dude, most native peoples do not claim to have been the mound builders. They don't. Like, that's not what their culture says. That's not what their history says. We had, in 1882, we had appointed a guy named Cyrus Thomas, who was the director of the Division of Mound Exploration. Okay. And he actually was a proponent of the idea that what most people actually thought, that there was an ancient race, that an ancient civilization that had been lost or was unknown, that had built these mounds, that they were the ones that had built these mounds, not the natives. But under pressure from higher up, people like John Wesley, right, insisting that it was the natives that had built this. It was the natives. It was their culture. It was their stuff. They're the ones that did it. We have to respect it. We have to respect that idea. So you had kind of really competing ideas. One is that we had to manifest destiny, right, and make sure that we were governing everything, but that we were governing it properly as well, right? And we had to make sure that we were doing justice where justice needed to be served. This is it's a very American idea. Not necessarily bad, but can easily be, misused. Just sort of like how liberal ideas are on the surface. A lot of them are very, very good, but when you put them into practice, a lot of times they're just goofy, right? Like they just don't work. So these guys were all over the place. They were on every hill, they were on every mound, they were at every search, they were everywhere. The Smithsonian was just everywhere. Now, in 1910, we see a guy, good Lord, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. His name is, I think, Alex Herdrilica. I can't pronounce his name. It's very weird. It's spelled A-L-E-S, so it looks like Alex, and Herdrilica is H-R-D-L-I-C-K-A. It's a really difficult name. I don't know where he's from, but I know that he was the curator of the Division of Physical Anthropology at the Smithsonian. Okay. And he was, you're going to love this, Wes. He was heavily involved in the eugenics movement pre-Nazism, which is wild. So wild. Anyway. And he was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. How about that? So he basically started setting this tone as the curator, that there was that America was an isolation. It was an isolate country, that there was no, cross-pollination until about 2000 BC. That no one had come over here, that this was it was an isolate place. He didn't support the concept of diffusionism, which says that other countries and other cultures rather had come and populated this landmass before 2000 BC, essentially, give or take. I'm sure he's probably wasn't dead set on that, but basically. Now, this is really where we started to see a lot of giant skeletons and relics and all sorts of other stuff literally just disappear. Like there was no more record of it, because before that there was a controversy of whose stuff is this, are giants real? But the Smithsonian by and large would receive these items before we'll say the early 1900s, right? They would receive these items, although they may not have publicized them quite as much or given them as much weight as they probably should have. But there wasn't an outright like denial or anything like that. It was just sort of, the Indians are really the ones that this stuff belongs to. It's all their culture, which is we're already beginning to see, right? The Indians themselves have tons of conflicting information about what actually happened to them and their ancestors. And again, I think that has to do with the fact that the Indians were not a monolith. We call them Native Americans because they were natively here when we got here. But we don't know what happened before that. And we have some ideas, but which I'll get to in a second. But anyway, my point here is that after about this time, when this gentleman, Alex Herdrlicka, starts to take control of the Smithsonian, and in particular, right, the physical anthropology division of the Smithsonian, is when we start to see the disappearing of all this, or literally just the lack of registry of any of these items, which is outlandish. I mean, it had been 300 years almost that people had been sending this stuff in and giving it to the Smithsonian, and there's actually an article back in, when was this from? David Hatcher Childress. I desperately tried to find this article. I could not find it online. If somebody can find it, it's called Smithsonian Gate. And I'm going to just read this to you because I think it's really, really telling about the Smithsonian. It says, in this article, he says, in a private conversation with a well-known historical researcher who shall remain nameless, I was told that a former employee of the Smithsonian, who was dismissed for defending the view of diffusionism in the Americas, that is, the heresy that other ancient civilizations may have visited the shores of North and South America during the many millennia before Columbus, alleged that the Smithsonian at one time had actually taken a barge full of unusual artifacts out into the Atlantic and dumped them in the ocean. That's a wild assertion. And we start to see stuff like that, right? And really kind of the deliberate agenda, or at least the seemingly deliberate agenda, would really point that direction. And furthermore, in an article in like 1934, in 1934, Hydrolica just came out and said that no, all the giant stuff was just a misunderstanding. Femur bones were improperly ascribed improper measurements, and it's just all made up stuff. None of that stuff is real, blah, blah. I mean, but he was also a known eugenicist. And I think the only reason that you would be a eugenicist, especially in pre-Nazi era, I don't know if you know this kind of history, Wes, but essentially the reason that the World War II bad people, Germans, and their leadership wanted to have the Aryan race, which is what they called it, is actually based on a super ancient occultic understanding of basically a race of super creatures, or super anthropomorphic human-like creatures that were tall, white, slender, had blonde hair, blue eyes. They're basically like Nordics. Like we would describe them as the Nordics. And so he was part of that, and he thought that the Indians, as well as blacks, I mean, I can't say African Americans exclusively, but he basically said that that they were the scum of the earth, that they were inferior and all that stuff. But what we see is from their accounts, like the accounts especially of Native Americans, bro, it's the total opposite. They were extremely, extremely informed. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had civilized societies. A lot of times they were well dressed. They were very modest in some cases, in many cases. And so you get this really huge narrative where the Smithsonian starts to disappear stuff. And the question really is, well, okay, if really there was no giant data, there was all misunderstandings. Well, where's all the artifacts?
Right.
Where are all those bones that you should be able to easily appeal to and say, no, dude, it's just a miscalculation. Look, this guy's 6'3", right? Or he's 6'6". Even 6'6", most people are like, that's pretty tall, but it's not an anomaly, right? It's just kind of rare. And so they don't have an account for that stuff. There is none of it. And anything before 18 something giant related is it's gone. It's just not there. And actually, one of the authors says that when he went to the Smithsonian, this is pretty recent, back in like 2014 or so, it was fairly austere. Like there was objects that clearly could have been on the shelves that weren't there. It was just kind of boring and bland, and kind of the way we live now. Just very modern and chic, and that's the end of it. And so, to sum this all up, we have to ask ourselves, well, kind of going back to the whole occultic, or does it prove the Bible? frankly, it has to be that there has to be some other, in my mind, there has to be some other spiritual element, because why would you hide all that stuff? Right? Unless there's some other element besides something spiritual that I don't understand at all. But even then, there's a higher truth that humanity's not being informed of.
Well, not only that, but I mean, if you're saying we we miscalculated a human femur, whatever, we miscalculated it, and it is now gone. Why would you not say, well, we miscalculated it and we destroyed it because it was not accurate? Like, I could live with you saying that you destroyed it because it was not accurate more than I can. It was not accurate, but there's no record of it now.
Yeah.
There was, now there's not, and you're
Right.
not admitting to having done anything with it. You're just saying it was inaccurate.
Well, and many times they're just outright denying that they ever even got it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we didn't get it. We don't know what you're talking about. No, we don't have that. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Why is there record of it?
Right. And the funny thing is these appeared in local papers where people dug them up on their properties, bro. And so the Smithsonian would go out and they would pay them money to take these skeletons, and they would make a registry of them until about this time, and there was a souring. I think it was a multitude of elements. I think that on part of the, what we call them, occultic leaders of their time, who honestly, these secret societies have existed for, hundreds of years now. Hundreds of years now. So they've been coldly calculating how to erase things from history that are inconvenient for them and their agendas, right? And so I think that the Smithsonian was, if not, initially created for the reason of disappearing this kind of stuff, is a very convenient framework to do it in. You could probably pick another fall guy if you wanted to, and there would be some other institution that did the same thing. It just happens to be the Smithsonian in this case. But I think that the plot is probably going to be would have always been the same regardless. We make this stuff disappear. It never happened. We keep it for ourselves. It is pretty crazy claim, though, that you would dump stuff in the Atlantic, and of all places in the Atlantic, which is very funny to me. I'm going to continue unless you had any questions, bro.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Well, the only thing that I wanted to comment, and I know you hadn't really got into the mounds or talking about the mounds as much, but if you're going there, I'll bring it up in a minute. That's the only thing I've got.
We absolutely should talk about the mounds. So I wanted to mention there is an account. So now we have a framework, right, to say that clearly the Smithsonian depreciated, ignored, treated poorly the plight and the reality of the Native Americans. Like, they didn't take them seriously, right? They thought that they were subhuman, especially this guy. I was gonna say Hydrolica. Can't remember how to say his name. It's such a weird name. Herdlicka, or Herdlisha. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Anyway, it's very telling to me that they, put the Native Americans on the back burner, the Indians on the back burner, and said, these are low peoples on the totem pole, so to speak, to coin a pun. But I did find this, West, to be really fast. This was really fascinating to me, dude. It really spoke volumes. At that time, obviously, we had a lot of racist ideas that were floating around here in the States about understanding of humans in base to their race and their level of intelligence based on that kind of stuff, which is patently disgusting, right? I can't think of a better word for it. It's abhorrent. It's a terrible idea. But what's really interesting is that the Mohawks say that there's an account of a gentleman whose name I don't have in front of me, but I can find for you here in a second here. He actually came across the Mohawks into their nation. He was taken captive, and as he spent time with them, he actually became very enamored with their race, with their tribe. He was very impressed by them. He was like, wow, these people are very amazing. This is crazy. He ends up actually marrying one of the tribes women. And obviously for obvious reasons, if you're marrying in, you become very close with the community, very tight and knit. And so he would tell a lot of their myths, their beliefs, and their stories and stuff that he had taken down. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting, he says that the giants had actually stolen the land from the Indians themselves. They took it, and that supposedly this land had been there since the world began, and it was taken from them. And he said that they were a group of giant white humans, right? Or giant white men, whatever you want to call them. But what got me, bro, is he says that was the same reason they were so hostile to white Europeans coming into their land, is because they associated what had happened to their ancestors of pillaging and raping and destroying and stealing and all that stuff from them. And they associated with the whites that were coming onto the land. And I was like, oh, wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Makes so much freaking sense, dude. And there are stories, by the way, I should mention this as an aside, but there are tons of stories where the Great Spirit or a god or something came down and wiped the giants out by flood over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
The water rose and then they died. And then, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's tons of accounts of flood stories, not just coming out of the Middle East or biblical sense. I mean, just about, any culture has a flood story, and it's usually wiping out of some sort of giant figure.
Yep.
That I've seen.
It's super ubiquitous. It is super ubiquitous. It's everywhere you look. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that there was this clearly is and was, and I think that there's a little bit more sensitivity to it today, but there's clearly a tug of war, right? Of ideas of what actually the natives knew, what they were, what they are. I don't think it's one and done. Again, I said I don't think Indians are a monolith, and I don't think what happened in America before we got here is a monolith either. I think it's a very, very complex history, super complex, and I think it has to do with South America. I think it has to do with other continents altogether. I mean, it's super complex, and we're just kind of scratching the surface because there's just so many ways you can go. The only other thing I really wanted to mention, my guy, is the mounds. The mounds are a curious thing. I think most people that know anything about the earth mounds here in the US are the famous Serpent Mound, right? In Ohio, which actually Shelly and I had planned to go to a long time ago. We were going to plan a whole trip and go out there and do it and everything. Maybe one day. But I guess the biggest question is what are those mounds for? And what do they contain, right? Now, a lot of them they were burial sites for sure. You've heard stuff like in the Egyptian pyramids where supposedly the pharaohs were buried. Like, that's hogwash. And, there's tons of evidence to say that was hogwash. But this is not so much, because they exhumed skeletons here, right? They exhumed all sorts of people here. There's actually one particular account. I wonder if I wrote that one out, man. It's really interesting because they found, did I write it here? There's a 13. Oh yeah. In West Hickory, Pennsylvania in 1870, they unearthed an 18-foot skeleton, which is just, it's beyond me to think about how big that is. That's like bigger than my 2-story house, dude. That's insane. Guy, I can't, he would have weighed in excess of 1,000, probably in excess of 2,000 of a ton. It was huge. But the craziest thing is that they uncovered a giant corroded helmet from this guy, and they uncovered, Wes, a 9-foot light sword with this guy. Holy cow!
Yeah.
That's you got wild.
I mean, you got to think about it. Like, if you took a Clydesdale horse which at its head is probably 8-9 feet tall, right, on all fours.
Yeah.
And that animal weighs 2,000 pounds.
Yeah.
You stand him on his hind legs, now he is probably closer to 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
So we tend to not think about things. I mean, when you look at Goliath, being 9 foot and some change, right? The smallest of his brothers, whatever. His spearhead alone was like 15, 20 pounds or something like that. Dude, if you break it down,
it's wild.
I've questioned, David kept his sword, David used his sword to behead, used Goliath's sword to behead him, but he kept it. Who wielded that sword?
I know, dude.
After that, you know what I'm saying?
World?
So it would make sense if it makes sense that sword would be 9 feet. I mean, if I'm going to use a sword today, it's probably going to be 4 or 5 feet.
And that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it'd be a big, heavy sword. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it makes sense.
4-foot sword is insanely difficult to wield, dude.
Yeah.
You need both hands. I mean, that's
a
broadsword for a regular human.
Yeah.
This was a light sword. And I just was thinking about that. I was like, my God, that sword would basically touch the roof of my vaulted ceiling downstairs. That is crazy, dude.
Yeah.
So anyway, they were uncovering stuff like this, right, in these mounds, which is where we got to that 18-footer. I just had to mention it because it's so crazy to me. Now, again, they don't really say that they're the ones that built it. The Mohawks, like I just mentioned, said that these were the remainders of fortresses. And actually, there's another account, I think it's near the New Mexico area, where they talk about the giants actually sending them down below the mountains and the hills and saying, you guys are going to live down here, we're going to take the high ground. And so they would literally build their fortresses on these hills. And that's where they live. And we actually see remainders of pueblos, right? Like way up in the mountains. And I don't know if you ever looked at that stuff online, dude, but there's people that they find these things in remote areas. They're not even part of the park. They're just in the wilderness. They're just out there in the middle of nowhere. People scour Google Earth. They scour Google Earth, and they find these spots. And they're phenomenal. Like, you try and get up to them and you're like, good God, how did these people get here, right? And some of those, they say that they used those to escape from the giants so that they couldn't get up to them. And others, I think, were parts of fortresses. I think that they're leftover earthworks and buildings from that stuff. Now, again, they are burial plots, but I think that they're also sacred spaces for rituals.
That's where I was going to go. Are they recreating high places?
Also, yeah. And I think that's part of it. And you know what, Wes, furthermore, they kind of double as both, right? Both a burial plot as well as a high place, and even a sacred place as well. And the reason that I say that, and we'll get into some actual science about this here in a second, but the reason that I say that in particular is also when giant, like people that are investigating giant seekers or hunters are looking for these places, it's very, very common for them to have storms come against them, or they can't get to the spot, or something out of the ordinary happens, that, anytime that their graves are going to be disturbed, something very weird happens. We won't say it's supernatural, but it is very weird, right? And it a lot of times has to do with storms. And there's endless accounts of, I was blown away. I was reading through some of the stuff, and like the Indians were talking about how, oh yeah, they would control the weather. And when the Spanish, I can't remember which crew it was, Alvarado de Peña, the one I mentioned earlier, I think when they ended up taking one of the chiefs hostage, he just made it rain, rain so hard that they couldn't hold on to him, and he escaped. So again, right, you have, are the Indians, are they Nephilim? Are they not? Because they're huge. Are these just things that they've learned? Is there interaction? Is there not? I mean, there's a lot of question marks, dude. Nonetheless, whenever anyone goes to these spots, there tends to be a lot of this kind of stuff happening, that there's disturbances or there's impedance, right, from figuring this stuff out. So in one sense, I think that, secret societies and occultists want to keep this stuff hidden, but I also think that the giants themselves want their stuff hidden. I don't think that they want their bones out exposed and known to everybody what they're for and how they can be used. I really do. I think that that's also part of it.
Or could these be the tombs that God has imprisoned them in, and he doesn't want to
Also,
we think, if you think biblically, I mean, Jesus rebuked the wind, right?
Yeah.
He
Certainly.
rebuked the wind, he calmed the storm, right?
Yeah.
So what we fail to realize is while Jesus is the Son of God, there are sons of God as well who would have had the same abilities. As far as,
yeah, dude,
I say same abilities, I'm not talking about being able to say right, because
similar supernatural
yes
abilities to do certain phenomena, right?
Yes.
I got you. I'm tracking with you, man. Yeah, man. I've also thought that that's entirely part of their punishment, right?
Right.
They're literally under the earth. They are under the earth. Now this is where it gets kind of wild. There's two things I want to mention here. In Ohio in particular, the earthworks that are there, we see that, well, there's a whole other topic actually I could go into, and I'll just mention it. There's a belief that one of the tribes of Israel actually came over here, and there are earthworks that would seem to reflect like a menorah and other kind of Jewish ideas or Israeli type concepts or images. So there is the idea that one of the tribes actually did come over here, and I think that there's actually some good evidence for that, but that's a whole nother topic. What I did want to mention is in these Ohio earthworks is that a lot of them seem to match the description that Plato had of the central city in Atlantis, with the concentric rings and the water and all that stuff. The way that these earthworks are laid out reflect that central city in its description. It's very, very interesting. It's very interesting, which kind of brings us to another place. I don't know that all the earthworks were for the same thing either, right? Like I probably weren't, just like all the pyramids in Mexico definitely weren't for the same things, right? But one of the things that we can point to here is actually something. Have you ever heard of haplogroup? Have you ever heard of haplogroups, what that refers to?
No.
So these are essentially genetic traits that are seen within certain demographics of humans, of creatures, of bipedals, or any other creature, by the way, too, right? But in particular, we research the bipedals, like humans, human-like creatures, to kind of find out where genetics have come from and who came from where and where they ended up. There's one called haplogroup X, and it's largely Middle Eastern, but it's found in Western Asia and Middle East, and that seems to kind of be its like origin point, which is right around Jordan, Israel, that whole little spot right there. And then you also have a diffusion of that haplogroup, and you see that haplogroup in particular in the Iroquois, and it's kind of weird because they've got like 25% of that haplogroup. It's haplogroup X. And it is theorized that by we'll call ourselves fringies, right? That haplogroup originates from Atlantis. Okay. Now let me give some context here before we, go full conspiracy theory, freaking tinfoil hat. This was super fascinating to me. You were asking about seers, and I promised I was going to talk about one. There is a guy whose name is Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce is, I think we mentioned him at the beginning. He was essentially a spiritist. I mean, he would be a channeler, basically, right? So he would receive messages, he would spout them out, and somebody would annotate them, right? which is not unheard of. I'm sure you've heard of other situations like that before. And so he, for many, many years as an occultist, he would do this, and he would just channel these messages from spirits or entities or whatever they were. And they would get written down and they got compiled, right? Well, there's a book, and I was really trying, I'm actually going to get my hands on it. I just haven't had time to read it yet. But there's a book, and I'm going to look up the name real quick. I think it's called The Mound Builders, if I'm not mistaken. That is basically the compendium of his information about the mounds, because he gave all sorts of, readings and stuff like that. I mean, just all sorts of random stuff. Okay, let me see here. I got it right here. It is called, yes, The Mound Builders, and I actually found it. Written, I can't remember when it was written. Anyway, it's called The Mound Builders by Edgar Casey. And these are basically, someone has written about these messages that he's given. Okay. Now, why am I bringing this dude up? So he made tons of these messages, and a lot of them, I mean, a lot of them have been accurate, like very, very accurate. There was one that he made, which I thought was like, holy crap, that has to be supernatural knowledge, that supposedly the Nile at one point ran the opposite direction. It ran backwards from where it's running now. And scientifically, they have gone in and found that that is absolutely 100% accurate. He talks about a lot of these mounds. He talks about how, and there's one listed here in the book where there's a female that she's living in Florida, and Florida at that time, obviously not now, right? And that there's earthen mounds and all this stuff, that they're all there. And he actually says that the Iroquois are descendants of Atlanteans. And sure enough, Haplo X, which is supposedly I think it's called the phenotype, right? Phenotype that it corresponds to supposedly the Atlanteans, is 25% in the Iroquois. And he, before they knew anything about Haplo X at all, he had already said that the Iroquoians were descendants of the Atlanteans, and that they went and settled in the Ohio Valley. And sure enough, it turns out that seems to at least have some truth to it, because that's where all that freaking giant activity is at, where we see all that stuff going on. I want to talk about the mounds themselves. I just kind of wanted to give you, some space to think about these things before we dig into the mounds. But the mounds are really, really interesting, dude. And some of them are really tall. Some of them are really, really high up, several feet high. I mean, not several feet, like a ton of feet high. And they have certain skeletons and other things, other ritual things that are buried in them, that they pull up all over the place, that they have, right? There's some mounds that are left. Most of them have been destroyed because manifest destiny. We just took over all the region and, kind of accommodated the surface to our means and our needs. Now, this is where I was getting into a little earlier. I was talking about the magnetic fields and how that affects the body and all that kind of stuff. Remember, I was talking about that a little bit. So it turns out that, and I'm going to try and get this right, because this is super, it's not only fascinating, but I think it's really important and very telling for us as Christians today to understand what the occult is trying to do and why they're trying to do it, and what our response should be, right? And what our limitations and what our understanding of worship and warfare should be. I think it's super important for that reason. And also because in Ephesians, it tells us that we should reveal the works of darkness, because when we do, they become light. So I'm just putting that out there. So it has been pretty, I'm going to just read this off a little bit so we can kind of get an idea here. Okay. It's been recorded up until recently, and this is actually about the mound builders and lost energy sciences. It has been recorded up to relatively recent times that there were adepts of high magic and shamanic practice, as evidenced in the knowledge of the Mantu principles, which are spiritual and fundamental life forces. The Lakota elder Vine Deloria, which is one of the guys that really contributed a lot of the information in this book here, describes that medicine men could take corn and grow it right in front of people's eyes. Now, I'm mentioning this for a very specific reason. So he goes on to talk about how, like, literally would plant it, bro, and in 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, it was like 15 inches off the ground. Just wild stuff. Not instantaneous, but very, very fast. And he kind of goes into this, how this was very, and was this potentially a way that fertility was proliferated in the ancient world, where famine might be very common and they didn't have any way to eat. And so they would plant this corn and it would grow instantaneously, right? And they would be able to survive because of this kind of stuff in the middle of famines. And so a lot of this kind of stuff seems to be, I mean, and I'm just going to kind of sum this up here. A lot of this seems to be having the ley lines are, yeah?
Say that again, every time we get something good.
That's what happens.
I'm telling you. The internet cuts out. You said something
just
about
the
ley
internet,
lines.
brother. You know what ley lines are, right? Okay.
Yes,
cool.
yes.
So these seem to be not only situated along ley lines, they're also situated, these mounds are also situated along longitudinal lines. So the higher something is up, you're going to love this. The higher something is up, the more gigantism we begin to see. It seems to be a trait. And the colder the climate is, the more likelihood we're going to see larger creatures in general. Anyway, so it makes sense why we would see more of this kind of stuff, not so much where you and I are, because we're a little bit farther south, but you would see this stuff up in like the Ohio River Valley, and you would see it up in Maine and in Canada and blah, blah, blah. And that's where a lot of this stuff is at. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Now, it actually turns out that there was a group. Who are these researchers? What were these guys' names? They had gone up to try and, is this the one? No, that's not the one. Essentially what they were trying to prove is it true that, like, when you're on these earthworks or you're around these megaliths, is there something that's physiologically happening to you? And sure enough, I don't have the research right in front of me because I was literally reading it right before here. Oh yeah, okay, actually I can read it here. Yeah. Okay, cool. Short story here. Basically, it's the hypothesis is that whenever you have these changes in a geomagnetic field, it can cause organisms to grow in size. And so the theory is that maybe these mounds were specifically built in higher geomagnetic concentrations so that things would grow better. And that obviously is high knowledge, right? And high strangeness knowledge as well.
Sure.
So you would have animals that would grow and gain considerable amount of body size over generations. And so this is also part of it, right? They could be trying to rebuild some of their height and their robustness over generations in spite of the failing earth that we live on, right? DNA, they also asked, could that be affected? And sure enough, your DNA in higher electromagnetic concentrations begins to become more robust. Your brain becomes more robust. Your body becomes more robust. And the question here ultimately that they ask is, did the shamans know this? Of course they knew this, dude. Like, how else are they going to know it, right? Like, this is obvious watcher technology, bro. And I think a lot of it, not only is it watcher technology, I think it's probably handed down by these giants to these peoples. And that could be for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they were amicable with these particular giants, or the giants needed a fall guy, or there's a million reasons it could be. But the point is that this is a repeat that we've seen over and over, or maybe a retelling is a better way to say it, because I think we all know, right, that the whole watcher story, they came, they gave information and technology. But it's proliferated throughout the world. It happens to this day. It is the same modus operandi that has been in working since the beginning. It's the same thing. All right, I'll give you this. It's a barter system. I'll give you this if you give me this. That's all it is, right? And so, oh wow. Well, thanks, Holy Spirit. Maybe that's exactly why the Indians bartered and they didn't sell and buy.
Maybe so. Maybe so. That's interesting.
Anyway, so the idea here is that they were able to do that. And I'm going to leave you with this one final anecdote, because I think that this really lends some credence to what the mounds were. Last thing, you ready? So they find this skeleton. I think it was like, good night, it was like 60 feet underground, super far underground. They find this skeleton, and they find a jar or like a container with the skeleton full of corn, okay, that they dig up out of this mound. And if I remember right, it was some farmer. I don't remember even why they were digging there. Probably like, reaccommodate the land for whatever they needed. But this farmer took this corn that God only knows how long it had been down there, dude. I mean, there's a buried skeleton with corn. He planted that corn. It gave him the highest yield of corn he had ever seen. So much so that he gave it out to his neighbors so that they could use it and just replant what had yielded from that corn that was buried under the ground with this giant. And so the theory is, well, what is happening there? Is it electromagnetic? Well, sure. I mean, in some form and fashion it is. I mean, these are natural things that exist in the universe that God created. But the issue here is how are the watchers using them, or how are the gods, we'll just call them what they are, right? How are the gods and demigods using them to their advantage to manipulate humans like they always have been? And so I think that that's exactly what we see with these mounds. On top of the fact that the Indians say, we didn't make them. They were just here, dude. They're leftover fortresses, their ritual areas, their burial grounds, their blah, 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 right? They were clearly used to enhance bodies. And again, I don't think it's monolithic. I think that the Indians probably were taught how to build some of these, and they use them for their own purposes. For, what comes to mind are those vision quests, right?
Yeah.
That natives go on. What better place to go on a vision quest than on a mound if it's specifically designed for that, right? So I think that that's exactly what they were. They were earthwork versions of megaliths, and they were used for the same properties. And actually, this is replicable, bro. Like there's one of the scientists that actually, they were testing these levels and finding out whether or not this electromagnetic field was contributing to bodies actually being able to grow better and use these mounds. And she set up in her own personal garden in Australia round stones around her garden in a particular fashion, and it caused everything to grow more prolifically. It caused everything to grow better. So what's my takeaway from that? Is that evil? No, it's not evil. It's just like anything else. Gigantism doesn't have to be evil. Natural laws God has created with plants and healing properties that they have, dude. It's biblical, right? God says that the leaves of the tree of heaven will be for the healing of the nations. So, I mean, don't tell me that everything shamanistic is essentially evil. No, it's just, it has properties that God designed it with. Like, that's just the way it is. So I think that that's what the mounds were for, dude. Several reasons, right? But I really do think that they had these charged areas that corresponded with the geography that benefited whoever they wanted it to benefit is probably the best way to say it. Great stuff.
I think it lends to even Christians today that want to get into astrology, or that want to get into crystals, or sage, or all of that stuff's proven and it works.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And and it's there for a reason. I think it was just never meant. I think, in my opinion, the watchers, the fallen angels, and that whatever you want to call it, these beings, these gods and demigods, not Jehovah God, but the gods and demigods, said, look, you can no longer be like God because of the fall of man. So we're going to teach you how. Not that those things are inherently bad, or that I think it has its intended purposes and intended uses, right? But when we put our faith into that crystal, or our faith into that sage, or our faith into our horoscope, whatever, that's when it becomes inherently bad. And that's the teachings that the Watchers were, these guys were teaching. Hey, don't believe in the God, believe in this, and believe in me because I taught it to you.
Yeah.
And which circles all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. We are doing the very same thing with men nowadays. We are putting our faith in men and not our faith in God, which, again, this is a far stretch for me, but when it says, there were giants in the days before the flood and after, and then people want to tie that into, so it was in the days of Noah. Well, maybe it's not that we're going to see giants again, but maybe it's the fact that we're going to create these giants, and by giants, I mean these gods other than God. We put so much faith into wanting to figure out what we were never meant to figure out. And we're not meant to figure it out because of the fall of man.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That's exactly right.
Like, not that God didn't intend us to have it and intend for us to use it, but using it outside of him is inherently wrong. And using it inside of him is correct.
Absolutely. And furthermore, and I'm glad you made that statement, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is that it's not that God didn't want to show us those things, excuse me. It's not that he didn't want us to know that stuff. It's that there was a set time frame and there was a set manner in which it was supposed to play out. And so all the devil did was get ahead of what God had already planned. That's all he did. Right? Like he's like, "Oh, I'm going to bring you the light." And you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense." When in reality, God's like, "Dude, I already had the light. If you would have just waited, I would have shown you. But you didn't want to wait. You wanted to go with this guy. All right. Sure, I guess he's the light bringer. Sounds cool, I guess." Right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately is what this comes down to. And I think this is a controversial statement, dude, but I really think some of these people, a lot of them, will probably see in heaven.
Sure.
I think that we think about the age of grace that we live in, and we want to just friggin' check all the boxes and say, if Jesus did not appear to you in this way and do just like this says, then you can't go to heaven. And I'm like, that's a goofy way to think about reality. And a lot of people are offended by that because they say, well, that's dispensationalism. And I'm like, no, dude, God's the judge. I'm not.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with what you or I think is appropriate or inappropriate. There's stuff God wants me to do I don't want to do, but I'm going to do it because I don't know the best answers. I literally don't know the best answers. That's why I'm going to do it. So yeah, man. I mean, I think a lot of these people, we're going to see them in heaven. I think a lot of the stuff that they did may well have been out of ignorance. Just like a lot of the stupid crap we do is out of ignorance, right? And God has grace on us. I want you people to hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Native Americans are ignorant. I'm saying that humans are ignorant. Humans are unattuned to the nature of heaven. Like, we're just not, right? Yeah. And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. So to sum it up, it's not a monolith. Giants in the Americas is not a monolith. It's not one said and done, and that's the end of it. I think that there's all sorts of aspects. I think that just like when Israel was told, don't mix your seed with their seed, don't marry their whatever, right? I think we see that same thing everywhere. I think that that's something that plays out over and over and over because we're human, we're fallible, we're weak, we're childish, immature, like all those things play a factor, and they cause outcomes that are unexpected and unintentional sometimes, right? But God is graceful.
I think ultimately and we've done it from the beginning, we can't just listen to what God says. You know what I'm saying? Like, ultimately, if we just listen to what he said, I can think of tons of situations in my life where I'm like, well, God, I don't understand how this benefits you. Why are you not changing it?
Yes.
Why are you not fixing it?
I can think of one right now.
yeah, this isn't benefiting you. It's not benefiting me. It's not benefiting the kingdom. This, that,
Sucks
and
for
the third.
everybody.
But 6 months to a year down the road, I can look back and it's like, holy cow,
Yeah.
it did benefit me. It did benefit him. It did benefit the kingdom. You know, we're so busy trying to figure out. I mean, it's just like studying Revelation. Like the Bible tells us, if you study this book, it'll, you know, it's good for you. Like you will be blessed. You should study that.
Yeah.
But studying the book of Revelation is not studying it to figure out when Jesus is coming. You know what I mean? Like studying the book of Revelation is to figure out Jesus, like to get closer to Jesus, to tell people about Jesus, not to figure out the date that he's coming. He's coming, folks. He's coming. It's just, and we can argue whether it's rapture or it's pre-rapture or it's post. Doesn't matter. He is coming. The problem is we have to be right.
Yep.
You know, we have to be right. And it creates division within the body. I mean, this whole topic of giants alone causes so much division amongst
it sure does.
And it's because everybody wants their take to be right.
And we have to be humble, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, how many times have I just said, I don't think it's a monolith? What does that mean? That means I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I think that there's a lot of answers. And actually, when we look at life, we find that that's usually the case. There's usually a multitude of answers and all of them are right. And you're pissed off because you think yours is the only right one. That's usually what it boils down to. But the truth of the matter is we don't know in every situation, which is why God is so filled with grace. Like he knows exactly what was happening to each and every one of us in each and every one of our situations, in and out of season, wherever it was. And by the way, I'm not, if you want to, just for clarification, if you want to call me dispensationalist, that's fine. I don't really care. It doesn't make it, because I'm not really adherent to a lot of those theological terms and concepts. I just think God ordains things the way he wants to. And so if it doesn't look like the age of grace to you and you don't think that that aligns like it should, well, tough beans, dude. I mean, you know, God gonna do what he want, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see that in the story of Judas, right? The Bible says that had to be him, right? Well, God wanted it. Why? Why did it have to be anybody?
Pharaoh,
like it makes
Egypt, right?
Yeah.
It makes God heart. You're like, why do you do that?
Saul, or like, you know, I mean, we see all these different things, but we fail to realize we don't understand the mind of God.
Yeah, man.
And unfortunately the angels didn't either.
Yeah.
And probably still don't, having been there with him and wanting to leave like that. I don't fathom that. You know what I'm saying? Like, how can you want to leave?
I heard a crazy, I get you. I really do. I've thought about that too. I heard a really crazy statement that it just resonated with me, dude. This guy who precisely had an out-of-body experience for 18 days, funny enough. He said that he also was curious about that. How is it possible that Satan fell? And he said, well, the thing is it wasn't like an all or nothing, bro. He was like, it was a 1%. I want this and I deserve it. And that's all God needed to say. Sorry, you can't be here. We have this very, I guess we would even call it infantile idea that everything was like, he was all out against God. It's like, no, that's probably not true. He's probably very, very repentant for what he did. Right.
Yeah.
And bitter and pissed and all that other stuff. But it's like, God doesn't tolerate that, bro.
Yeah. And you know, this is, and again, I
don't know that for sure.
Well, I mean, I and that's why I said earlier, like, I feel bad for Satan because he gets blamed for so much, right? But like, I tend to lean there. I don't think it's that Satan thought he was better than God or Lucifer. I think he just thought he was equal to him. You know, I'm this. You told me I'm this. You know, so if I'm everything that you told me, why am I not equal to you?
Yeah.
You know, and there again, that right there, that 1%, it's like, nope, because that mindset right there goes against everything I've created. It goes against everything I want done. Yep. And I would guarantee you, if you could sit down with the devil today and have an interview with him and ask him, do you love God? He'd probably tell you yes, because it's his creator. You know, is he in love with him? I don't know. And that's the mind of Wesley. You know what I'm saying? But like my father, My father abandoned me. I was 15 months old. He left my mom. He was a drunk. He was an alcoholic, a drug addict. He left us at 16 years old. I remember seeing him for the first time laying in his casket. Fast forward, Facebook was invented. So I'm mid-20s. I connect with some relatives on Facebook, and he talked to me about how great my dad was and how wonderful my dad was and how my dad was at his graduation and this, that, and the third. And I started doing math, and I'm like, bro, you're literally 10 years older than me. So you're telling me, I said, where did you live? And he told me, I said, so you literally live 10 minutes from me. And my dad was at your graduation, and I would have been, 6, 8 years old. And he didn't come see me. Don't tell me how great he was. You know what I'm saying? And I lived with that bitterness for a long time. Sure. But at the same time, when he died, it broke my heart because it was my father.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yep. So again, I'm putting Satan I'm trying to answer whatever the word anthropomorphically. Yes. I'm trying to make him a Mickey Mouse creature, and he's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But part of me is like, God is still his creator.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not love for God, but I'm sure there's definitely regret.
Yeah.
If I had to do it over, I probably wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? That type thing. And again, I'm not trying to tell anybody we should be on the side of Satan or anything like that. No. But I'm saying in order to better understand God and understand what happened, I don't think we can just sit here and make
blanket statements.
It's hard. It's hard because we don't know the mind of Satan in it, or the mind of Lucifer, why he did what he did, but we also don't understand the mind of God on why can't you forgive him? You can forgive us. Yeah. I can tell you numerous times I've gave you the finger and told you to F off, and you're like, come here. But yet Satan says, well, hey, we're equal. Nope, sorry, see ya. And so it's to try to wrap our minds around the mind of God, in my opinion, is stupid. Like, we need to stop trying to figure God out and just start accepting God for who he is.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we are in the age of grace. Thankfully, Jesus did come so that when we become prideful, just as Satan did or did or does, God is not flicking us off the edge of the earth either. You know what I mean? And thankfully, we have Jesus for that.
As we deserve.
So I don't know, man. There's a lot of stuff there to unpack, but again, I'm not trying to say I love the devil or anything like that.
You know what, man? This is definitely a topic for a different episode, but I've really been contemplating the way that spirits come across. And I think that we probably sometimes add an additional, or no, not additional. What do I want to say? We add maybe a level of anthropomorphicness. I don't know if that's a word, of being anthropomorphic, of being human-like. I think we add maybe a little bit more to the sons of God and the angelic hosts than really is attributable.
I can agree with that.
I think that they probably have very different, not only mindsets, but they probably have very different drives as well. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And so I think that really, because I think really what got me started thinking about this, Wes, was, and I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent here, but it just got me thinking about why would, I didn't even tell you this, and I'll mention it here. When I was reading one of these cannibalistic accounts, I don't know if it was the red hair giants, but anyway, they were tormenting this group. It was the red hair giants. And one of the things that struck me, it just rubbed me the wrong way so bad. I was like, that is so despicable. Good God. Is when the giants would kill the clans members of the Paiute, they would take their bodies and eat them. Okay, once they were dead, after they had finished fighting him. That, of course, right, makes sense. But what was even more sickening to me, bro, is they would do two other things that just was vile to me. They would go and dig up their people and eat them. And they would dig up their own people and eat them too. It just was so dark to me. I was like, that is so gross, like so dark. Like, okay, you eat humans, it's gross, but you're digging them up and then you're eating your own tribesmen as well. Like, it just kind of rattled my brain when I read it. I just was kind of like, oh God. And I think that really got me thinking, I don't think spirits think the same way we do.
No,
they can't, because I don't know that anybody that's not literally possessed by like a high level spirit could do that and be in their right mind. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a dark thing to do, man. It's a very dark thing. But if you just view the body as a meat machine, I guess right? You know what I mean?
No, I get it. I mean, far too often we use the term angel loosely, right?
Yeah.
Angel is basically a job title. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? So whenever you get into looking at the angels, and we have very, very little. I mean, we know what Ezekiel describes, right? And some in Isaiah, and and obviously they can take whatever form they need to take to talk to man, but
accomplish.
We try to put them on our level.
Yeah.
And in reality, they come to our level.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Like,
they're not on our level. They come to our level to achieve whatever it is they need to achieve, and I mean, you look at it with Michael and Gabriel, I mean, just in general, I mean, the war machines that they are. Well, when they come before a human, I would imagine their job title as a warrior is to just destroy whatever is against God.
Pretty much.
But yet, whenever you see Gabriel come, who is it? He comes. Is it Lot? Whoever he comes to, he then shifts his title, or shifts his job from destroyer to savior at that point. Does that make sense? Like, so they come to our level. We don't go to theirs. Or if that makes sense, if what I'm trying to say,
totally.
They're not like us. They have to switch to that mode. So it would make sense if they just view us as whatever, to just destroy them.
Yeah.
Destroy them. It doesn't matter.
And it's I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how we're the hollow ones versus they're the solid ones. Right? Yeah.
Makes sense. Man, it's a lot to unpack.
I know, dude. Sorry, I gave you a lot today.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and we're going to need to do it again. Guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. I'm in talks with Ricky and with Lael. We got our 100th episode coming up here in a few weeks. So
let's go.
The plan, if we can make it happen, is to do a special episode with Lael and with Ricky and get both their insights together. So yeah, it should be interesting just to not let them duke it out, not let them battle it out, but just see how I'm going to sit here as a spectator and just watch two minds just unfold, hopefully. So, but yeah, Ricky, man, thanks again for coming out. And listen, guys, if you haven't yet, go over, you can find him, the Christian Theological Dark Web.
Yes, sir.
Anywhere. You can find him anywhere. Go subscribe every
you guys
platform.
Can come check us out. We got Nephilim month all month long. June is Giant June month. I'm just giving you a quick reason why. June is Pride Month, and I treat it as what it is. It's killing off the Nephilim Pride Month. So go support us, man. Go check out our stuff. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, man, they got some good stuff there. Show them some love. Their information will also be down in the show notes, so you can find them there. Any final thoughts?
Just that we need to be respectful of the reality God has given us. We need to steward it properly, and we need to steward our minds and our bodies properly too. And yeah, man, don't take these topics lightly. I don't think it's any coincidence that I started losing my voice as soon as I was about to start recording this. So yeah, you said it very well. There are challenges that come along with research. The powers fight back. They do.
Yeah, 100%.
And we just trust in the Lord. He takes care of it, man.
Well, I can tell you this. Go back and watch any episode where I have a guest on via Zoom. If we're talking about whatever, there's no glitches.
Yep.
We start talking this topic, it'll glitch every single time. There'll be distractions. Again, my thoughts and prayers go out to my buddy and his family.
Amen.
But I mean, there's constant distractions like that anytime you're doing this. And I think number one, is there's a spiritual level to it that
Mhm.
you need to be ready for and prepared for.
Yeah.
And number one, I think the enemy doesn't want you to know that, but I also think the Holy Spirit sometimes is saying, hey, I'm trying to check you and get your attention and make sure that you're tuned in and
Yep.
prayed up and ready to listen to this. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, don't dive into it just because it's cool.
Yeah.
Because I can attest to you, when you do, things are going to start happening, dude.
Yep.
And it's not always like the most trivial, awful things. It's just little things that get you off kilter. You know what I mean? It gets your mind off God, and you begin to, if you're going to begin to be looking into supernatural topics, even if it's, and again, I'm not against deliverance ministry, right? But if you feel God's calling you to be a deliverance minister, you better be prayed up and ready. It's not just something fun. It's not sitting around and having discussions with demons. You know what I mean? Like, you need to be prepared, because not only is your life in danger, then the person that you're praying with's life is hanging in the balance. Maybe not physically, but definitely spiritually.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes physically too. So anyway, listen, guys, as always, we love you. I know Ricky and the guys over at the Christian Theological Dark Web love you. And remember this, Jesus loves you, most important.
Amen.
And Romans 8:31 tells us, if God be for us, who can be against us? That means we can go out and crush every single day. So with that being said, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the show with your friends, and we'll see you guys next time.
Get it.
Have a great one.